Good morning, members. We have a quorum, and this is the appointed time. So let's make a start, and let's invite the administration in first. At the last meeting, members raised some issues, and the government has prepared its response. So this morning, we're going to invite the administration to respond to issues raised by members at the last meeting. There will be a briefing, and then we will look at the bill. So may I welcome Ms. Ivy Law, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing, and Ms. Cordelia Lam, Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Housing. They're from the Transport and Housing Bureau. And also Ms. Wong from the Transport Department, and Ms. Marcella Lee, Assistant Commissioner for Transport, Mr. So Chen Chun, Chief Transport Officer, and Mr. Alfred Lam, Chief Engineer. Welcome, everyone. Yes. Would you please walk us through the administration's paper? I understand that there will be a PowerPoint presentation. So perhaps you can walk us through as well. I'd like to remind members that this meeting is scheduled to be adjourned at 10. So over to you, DS. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Now, in relation to this bill, the 30-year BOT franchise of the Eastern Harbour Crossing will expire on the 7th of August 2016. So the objective of this bill is to provide the legal backing for the tunnel to operate and manage as a government tunnel. There is no policy change. The idea is to incorporate the operation of the Eastern Harbour Crossing into the new bill. So from the point of view of users, there is no substantial change. Now, the previous meeting, members indicated that and asked whether if members moved the motion to amend the tolls of the tunnel, whether it is in line with the Rule 57 of the ROP, and we sought advice from the Department of Justice. Because in the long title, the electrical brief, and in the substantive provisions of the bill, the government has set out the objective of the bill, and that is to incorporate the existing tolls under the EHC Ordinance to the bill, and therefore the suggestion does not fall within the scope rule in Rule 57(4) of the ROP, and this is applicable to any amendment moved either by the members or by the government. The committee also wrote to the government to inquire about another point. That is, in the event that this bill cannot be passed within this legislative year, what would happen? Yesterday, we consulted different government departments and issued a paper. Well, basically, if the bill isn't passed in time, there will be 4 consequences. First of all, the tunnel and surrounding the traffic network will be severely affected, including the resident and working population in Kwun Tong and the vicinity. And secondly, there will not be the necessary legal backing for the smooth operation of the EHC. And thirdly, as far as the employment of tunnel staff is concerned, they will be adversely affected, because if EHC becomes a government tunnel but without a proper toll structure, the frontline tunnel staff responsible for collecting tolls and frontline staff for directing traffic will not have the legal backing for their work. And as a result, the jobs may no longer be needed, and at least 100 frontline staff responsible for such duties will be affected. And if the bill is not passed, before the prorogation of this term, then the government will be obliged to push it through in the next term, but newly elected national members will not be sworn in until October this year. From the expiry of the franchise on the 7th of August to October, legal procedure will affect members of the public, and the effect will persist not only for days but for weeks, but for months. And this is unpalatable, and I will now defer to my colleagues to give you the details of this paper. Well, in fact, Deputy Secretary already succinctly walked members through the consequences if the bill is not passed. So I will give you the details of the bill. Now, the 30-year Build, Operate, Transfer BOT franchise of the EHC will expire on the 7th of August 2016. Then there are three objectives of this bill. The first one is to incorporate the bill or EHC in the Road Tunnels Government Ordinance to provide the legal backing for the management of the tunnel as a government tunnel. The second objective is to repeal the EHC Ordinance and also provides for the necessary savings and transitional arrangements. For example, for drivers that breach certain provisions in the EHC Ordinance, after it is repealed, the government will continue to take up the prosecution work. And other references to the franchisees will also be amended or repealed. So what happens if the bill isn't passed? The EHC Ordinance expressly provides that all rights and obligations will expire at the expiry of the franchise on the 7th of August this year. So if the bill isn't passed, then the government cannot rely on the Road Tunnels Government Ordinance to manage and operate the EHC, and in the event of that, serious traffic congestions will be affected. The road traffic network will be paralyzed, and 680,000 resident population and 540,000 working population in the surrounding districts will be directly affected. So we can refer to this plan. This is the tailback in Eastern Kowloon during morning rush hour. So as you can see, for Kwun Tong Bypass, Kwun Tong Road, and Lei Yu Mun Road, and Tseung Kwan O Road, you can see the existing traffic queues. And what happens if tolls cannot be collected? You can see that for the Kwun Tong Bypass traffic queue, it will go as far as Kowloon Bay, and for Kwun Tong, or for Lei Yu Mun Road, all the way to Yau Tong, and for Tseung Kwan O Road, the traffic will tail back to the Tseung Kwan O Tunnel. So, apart from these trunk roads, streets and inner roads will also be affected. So the whole area, marked in pink, will be subject to traffic jam. So what happens during evening rush hour? This is the existing traffic queue. And if tunnels cannot, or if tolls cannot be collected, the situation will be even worse than the morning rush hour. For example, the tailback along Kwun Tong Bypass will go beyond Kowloon Bay, and Kwun Tong Road all the way to Choi Hong, and for Lake Moon Road, that means all the eastern Kowloon region will be subject to traffic congestion. As far as the Eastern District is concerned, as you may know, for the eastbound and westbound traffic already, there are traffic queues. As of today, the traffic queue tails back to Tai Kwu Shing. And if tolls cannot be collected, for the westbound traffic, the traffic will tail back to Hang Pa Chun. So the whole Eastern District, including Tai Kwu Shing, Con Hill Gardens, and Shau Kei Wan, will be subject to traffic congestion. And this doesn't only happen to the Eastern Island Corridor, but also to the whole district. And again, in the evening hours, as you can see, there is a more serious traffic jam for eastbound traffic. And if tolls are not charged, the traffic will tail back to North Point, Tin Hau, and Causeway Bay. And once Causeway Bay becomes jammed, the Wan Chai and central areas will also be seriously affected, including Admiralty. So this is about its impact on traffic. The second point is about the smooth operation of the Eastern Harbour crossing. At present, we entrust eligible contractors to manage and maintain the tunnel. And this is important because even for minor traffic incidents such as tire puncture, there will be frontline staff to direct traffic to ensure smooth traffic along the tunnel. And if it cannot be incorporated in the Road Tunnels Government Ordinance, the government will not be able to commission any contractor to do the work, including direction of traffic. And as far as the tunnel is concerned, it's not an ordinary road. It's an underwater structure, which is enclosed. It is more dangerous, and it is not in line with public interest. So, still, if it's considered unsafe or unsuitable to allow free-flow traffic, the government may have to close the access to EHC. And I believe that if one of the three major tunnels is closed, then the whole of Hong Kong, including Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, will be affected. And the third aspect is adverse impact on employment of tunnel staff. And as mentioned, the government authorized personnel in the MOM contracts and management operation and maintenance contracts to regulate traffic at the EHC. And if the tunnel is not incorporated in the government tunnels ordinance, then the government will not be able to appoint any contractor in this regard. Under the original arrangement, the frontline staff will be re-employed, and failing so, about 100 frontline staff will lose their jobs. And as mentioned by the Deputy Secretary, this doesn't just affect traffic for days or for weeks, but for months. Because if the bill isn't passed before the prorogation, it will have to be resubmitted as soon as possible after members are sworn in October, and that will take months. And I'd like to give a summary for the three tunnels. There is a daily traffic throughput of about 2 million, and it affects most road users and members of the public, including those going to school, those delivering goods or other commercial activities. And not only tunnel users will be affected, other road users, other passengers will also be affected. This will adversely affect members of the public and the mobility. Three members, Mr. Tan Ka-pil first.
Any time limit, Chairman? No, or just be precise. Thank you. Yesterday, I talked to unions and met with some district councillors together with the DS. We're concerned about the transition, and we also expressed to her our views on tunnel tolls. I think what's urgent now is whether we can actually have the government take over the tunnel after August, and also to issue a tender to actually hire the same staff. We want to get 80% of the staff to remain in their posts. But if the bill were not passed, then their jobs will be lost. That's what we're most concerned about. And also, we heard that if, as you said, if the bill were not passed, then you cannot charge the tolls according to the law, which, in other words, to control the traffic flow. Then, the entire Northern Ireland would be paralyzed and so forth, those scenarios. It seems like those scenarios would be even more actually impactful than Occupy Central. So, Chairman, I think if we can't finish the scrutiny today, even if we can finish today, we are not confident whether we can deal with it during the electoral term. Of course, Chairman, you can extend your olive branch and try to find a way out for the copyright amendment bill. But, you can look at the atmosphere on the first day of the new year, and that actually made us not optimistic. And every year there's also the 2-month filibustering expected for the budget debate, as many members have done in the past. So I don't know what will happen. But given what I've just said, even if we agree with the government's view today and finish the scrutiny, based on my past 2 years of work here, I don't have confidence that this bill would be passed. So you can see, the far-reaching consequences of filibustering more than that of the Occupy Central. So, if the bill could not be passed, I'd like to ask, can we, according to existing law, actually appoint the existing BOT company to extend their service for 1 year? Of course, the toll and the first would be theirs. Do you think that's what we can do as an expedient means? Because many people, including the tunnel staff, are very concerned. Of course, the tunnel policy and the tolls, I've got views on them, but I think the most urgent issue is to extend the service. Members? I think we're here to scrutinize a bill. We are a Bills Committee. We're not the transport panel. So please be reminded of that. I don't want to see that, tunnel policy or toll policies, or even if the bill could not be passed within this term, the consequences of that. I think all those are not supposed to be discussed at this committee. Otherwise, this Bills Committee would become, a transport panel meeting dedicated to, staff department and so forth of the Eastern Harbour crossing. So, members, when you speak, or if you have further questions, please bear that in mind. I just don't want to have to stop you later on. So questions have been raised still. So can the administration give a brief reply? Thank you, Mr. Tang and Chairman. As for whether we have the power to appoint the BOT company, according to 72D of the Eastern Harbour Crossing Ordinance, the BOT's obligations and rights will terminate when the franchise expires. Therefore, we don't have any legal basis to continue to appoint the company. So if the bill were not passed, there will be no legal basis for EHC to be operated by the government. Okay, in your paper, you said that when situation gets worse, you wouldn't rule out the possibility of closing the Eastern Harbour crossing. Well, what do you mean by the most, serious scenario? Yes, we've mentioned 2 possible scenarios. That is, when the bill is not passed, what will happen to the tunnel? According to the existing ordinance, we can invoke Cap 734 of the road traffic tunnel. road traffic ordinance to actually treat the tunnel as a road, and also for rights and obligations that are not conferred upon the BOT company, those can continue to be exercised. So the government can actually have limited monitoring of the tunnel in that case. But we all know that road and tunnels are two different things. If we use the road traffic ordinance to govern the tunnel, that is not definitely ideal and not, actually most beneficial to the public. As Ms. Lee just said, our cross-harbor traffic involves more than 250,000 cars. So, you can imagine the consequence of having the tunnel closed. You can also see from the PowerPoint that there could be huge traffic congestions caused, and when things become extreme, the nearby traffic would also become chaotic, resulting in potentially accidents. If that's the case, then we would have no choice but to close the nearby roads. That would really reduce in actually huge paralysis or paralyzed in the on the island. Ken, I think right from the start, we were warned about the consequences of not having the bill passed. So it's not that we want to, mention points that you just want us not to talk about. We've been warned about the serious consequences. Well, we've been told about the serious consequences still, but I don't know why. 2 years earlier, when the government said, there could be tunnel reduction at the East Harbour crossing, and you haven't yet provided us with any statistics. We are having this meeting at 8:30, and we were not given more figures, so that when the bill goes to the main electrical meeting, people will know more about the situation. Our electrical is not operating normally now. There's this serious problem of filibustering. It's not that we don't want to have the bill passed, but there are people who don't, want the bill passed. There are people who don't like Hong Kong, who like to, hinder the work of electrical. But anyway, I can sense the crisis here. But you can't just warn people about, so something km would become 1.7 km of traffic queue and so forth. You need to tell us what contingency plans you've got at the same time. Even if the toll or the tunnel would be free, you can impose other sorts of road restrictions. And then, if that fail, what would be the consequences? You need to let us know all those possible scenarios. Why you can't control the traffic situation in the first scenario? So you need to have provided us with the concrete figures. How many police would have to be deployed in the worst scenario and so forth. What clothes would be diverted or closed and so forth. You need to try your best to give us all the information to convince members and the public that the bill has to be passed immediately. You can't just warn us, give us the worst consequences, in one go. So have you all got all those contingency plans in mind? Well, I would suggest that the government, actually have this issue discussed at the transport panel first. The figures requested, contingency plans suggested by the members. If the bill will not pass, what would be your plan? Do you have any backup plan? I think you need to provide those information to the transport panel for further discussion. Chairman, I've got one more question. Just then, I wanted to know about the timetable as well. By when? Well, they say that by August, the East Harbour crossing will have to be handed over to the government. I'm talking about the timetable of submitting the bill to electrical. I know. But if the bill could not be passed in the legislative term, definitely that means the franchise, that will actually wait past August before a solution will be found. But we have serious traffic jam here in National. Do they think that a bill could be passed? Well, it's not up to them to speculate. It's our work. Okay, let's not dwell on this issue. Poon Xiuping, next. Thank you, Chairman. I know that the Chairman, you've asked us not to discuss policy issues, but members concerned about the papers admitted, and we've raised a concern about whether the bill could be passed within the timetable proposed by the government. But I share the same view as Tan Ka-piu on whether staff could have their jobs retained. But I just want to get more details. This bill itself, it's to, should by August 21st this year, should the franchise expires, it wants to incorporate it under the road tunnels government regulations. But then, would you have actually asked the contractors to invite tenders, or would you have that arrangement made after the franchise has expired? Theoretically, if the incorporation does not happen, then you need to have actually made backup plans. What would be the consequences on the traffic flow? You should not just concentrate on the impact on, for example, Kowloon Bay, as a result of the closure of EHC. You have to look at the overall impact. Yes, just then the DS has said it has done the tendering work. If we cannot pass the bill, there's no point, even if tenders have been awarded. Okay, so they've started with the tendering exercise. DS, could you give the details? Yes. Basically, the government has started earlier started the tendering process, and we can actually announce the tender results in 1 or 2 days. So we should be able to find the operator of the tunnel very soon. Next one. Yes, just then our colleagues were asking, should the bill could not be passed within this legislative term, does the government has any backup plan? And that's exactly what the public is worried about as well. We work in Eastern District. Many residents have asked us, when is a fee charging tunnel, yet traffic congestion is serious and there's a long traffic queue. So should it happen that because of filibustering, the bill cannot be passed, the residents are concerned that they wouldn't be able to get to work or return home or cross the harbour through Eastern Harbour crossing. So you can imagine how serious the consequence will be. Therefore, we really try to, get the bill. We're very anxious to get the bill passed.
Even if it's swiftly dealt with by our Bills Committee, traffic congestion is still a serious problem, and we remain not optimistic about it. So we should let the public know what happens if the bill isn't passed. Of course, Chairman has said that more detailed discussion can take place at the panel on transport, and I won't further dwell on this point. Anyway, after the handover of the EHC, assuming that the process is smooth, when will the tolls be set? Because after passing the bill, the tolls will also have an impact on the traffic in the future. I'd like to know more from the government. Any preliminary ideas? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. On the diversion of traffic among the three or redistribution of traffic among 3 tunnels. At last year's panel meeting, the government has already stated its position. More detailed study is required. We all understand that for the Cross-Harbour Tunnel, there is serious traffic congestion at the moment, and for the EHC, is reaching capacity with traffic jams in the vicinity. For the Western Harbour crossing, there is capacity, but because of the connecting problems with the connecting roads, we are unable to use or maximize the use of WHC. So as far as the redistribution of traffic is concerned, all 3 tunnels should be involved so as to avoid any heavy impact on any particular tunnels. So after the commissioning of the Central Wan Chai bypass, we can then link up all 3 tunnels and the connecting the road network, and by then we'll come back with a better proposal on the redistribution of traffic. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. I agree that originally our discussion on the EHC bill should be a simple one. However, the government is telling us the consequences if the bill isn't passed. I think you're trying to stir up panic in the public, because you talked about operation of the tunnel, the risks involved. And I think in the current circumstances, you are going to cause panic among the public on as they will have grave concerns on the operation of the HC. So I have 2 points to make, Chairman. The government will take back the EHC on the expiry of the franchise, and the government has the right to charge tolls. So my question is this. Is it the case that the government doesn't have in mind any adjustment of tolls, or including public transport fares, after taking back the HC? I think they've already given the answer, but please repeat, Deputy Secretary. As we mentioned just now, the bill states very clearly the policy objective. According to the rules of procedure of the Legislative Council, neither the government nor the nor members can make an amendment in this regard. So that means we cannot discuss or move any amendments on the adjustment of tolls. Discussion is of course all right. As Chairman suggests just now, we can go back and have a more detailed discussion at the transport panel. And in fact, last year we already had a discussion. Because for tunnel tolls, in this council, different political parties have proposed that adjustment of tolls should be carried out when the government takes back the HC. But if the long title now restricts any possibility of that, and the government is not going to take this on, I don't know what rule in the ROP can be invoked to pressure the government to deal with the issue. At the last meeting, another member already raised this issue. That is why the government has given us this response. Since the bill involves only incorporating the existing toll structure into the new legislation, no amendment is needed. The members may move amendments on its own. You may give a try, but according to the legal advice, this is not viable. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. Now, let's assume that the bill cannot be passed. Now, for the existing road tunnels government ordinance, what you're going to do is to put EHC in the list, in the schedule, to make it a government tunnel. So I'd like to talk about section 15, 16, and 18 of the ordinance. let's say if the government already has already taken back the HC, but if the bill isn't passed, then how will the road tunnel ordinance be invoked to empower traffic police officers to carry out their work? Now, Section 15 has to do with traffic congestion. Section 16 has to do with abandonment of vehicles. Section 18, installation of cable and ducts in the tunnel, and that's a safety concern. So if the bill isn't passed, if by then the government has already taken back the EHC and that traffic direction is required, then can the functions contained in these three sections be carried out in other provisions? Now, Deputy Secretary, I think what we should focus on is to scrutinize the bill instead of discussing what happens if the bill isn't passed. So I think we should instead move on to examine the bill itself so that we know what happens if the bill isn't passed. Because the bill provides the necessary legal backing for the government to government personnel to carry out its work. So if the bill cannot be passed, then that means the government and its agents will not be able to carry out their duties. So, Deputy Secretary, would you please focus on this point? So if there are no other questions, we can move on to examination of the bill. As we mentioned just now, we would like to incorporate the EHC into the Road Tunnels Government Ordinance. And if this bill isn't passed, then EHC will not be incorporated, and therefore the ordinance will not apply. Well, very quickly, can it be captured in the Road Traffic Ordinance? For Cap 374 Road Traffic Ordinance, as I said just now, the objective is to regulate roads, and as we understand, tunnels and roads are different. So to regulate tunnels as roads will be contrary to public interest, Mr. Leung. I agree with you, Chairman, that we should not spend so much time on discussing the government's response on the consequences if the bill isn't passed. Because basically the C.Y. Leung administration has the power to do something about the Copyright Amendment Bill. You can either convince the copyright owners' representatives to adopt the fair usage principle so that we don't need to spend so much time on this. Now, I believe that this bill is a simple one. We should be able to complete it within this legislative term. But the other point is that on the 1st of September 1999, there was a similar handover regarding the Cross Harbour Tunnel. So my question is this. Can we look at the situation in 1999 and see if the tunnel was handled the same way as now? Yes, basically the same. Basically the same, so any different? Not much difference. So apart from the name of the tunnel, all the arrangements are the same? Well, of course, as far as traffic management is concerned, over the past 30 years there have been changes, but basically the government is in charge of traffic management. So if there are no other questions from members, we will move on to clause-by-clause examination of the bill. We will look at the Chinese text, and perhaps a legal advisor can help us read the English text and see if there are problems. Who would like to make a start, Ms. Lam? Thank you, Chairman. Members. Ms. Lam, please pause here. The legal advisor would like to raise a point. Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's not a comment. Now, if members would like to refer to the marked up version provided by the Electrical Secretariat, you would see that in terms of the order of the content, the marked up version is different from the blue bill, because for the repealing sections and saving provisions, they are in the blue bill. As for the Secretariat, we believe that a change of order is necessary. That is to state the or mark the amendments as they appear in the order as they appear in the ordinance. So that is just a matter of logistics. Ms. Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Well, as the legal advisor said just now, we're going to read the marked up version, the Chinese text. And if members have comments on any particular clause, we can then discuss the particular clauses. Now, for interpretation in clause 2, an additional bracket 1 will be added, because in 0001 there will be you can see on this page there is a square here, and this is the addition. And we have amended the interpretation for tunnel, because tunnel includes the area adjacent and this is the existing definition. We have added tunnel area in the new definition because in the English text in particular, sometimes tunnel is written in capital letters especially when we refer to the CHT or the HC, and to avoid confusion, we have included tunnel and tunnel area in the same definition. That is, in relation to the area of the tunnel and the area adjacent to the tunnel. And this is an amendment to the definition of the two words. No substantial change in its meaning. And also for the square indicating addition, this is in relation to the Castle Peak and Discovery Bay tunnel area. And if a plan is deposited, then the latest plan should be referred to. This is just a technical amendment. And then application in clause 3. It has now been changed to Schedule 1. When we come to page 3, 0003, in Schedule 1, you can see that Eastern Harbour Crossing is added in item 3. And we've also changed the sequence, and that's the amendment on page 0001. I'd like to remind members, if you have questions, please tell me anytime. Please continue. 0002, the triangle. As you mentioned in our opening remarks, as far as this bill is concerned, apart from incorporating EHC into the government tunnel ordinance, we also need to repeal the EHC ordinance Cap 215 and the subsidiary legislation. So on this page, items A to F will be repealed. That is EHC ordinance Cap 215 and the subsidiary legislation A to E. We have also added in 24 savings and transitional arrangements for the Eastern Harbour Crossing. These provisions have to do with law enforcement, because according to the existing EHC ordinance, some enforcement action may still be ongoing, and after the ordinance is repealed, we need to provide for the powers to be reserved. And we have savings and transitional arrangements, and we'll come to that in a moment.
邊啲係有過渡性嘅安排？
No questions? Okay, I'll move on to 003. As I said, there'll be a Schedule 1. We've added Eastern Harbour crossing to it. And we've also arranged the tunnels according to alphabetical order. Previously, there wasn't a particular order to follow. So we've added HC, and on the left of 003, you can see, there's a note there. But for the sake of consistency, this actually has become part of the provisions. Schedule 2, yes, page 004. Schedule 2, as I mentioned, it lists out the savings and transitional arrangements. And we've added an interpretation here to explain what are the savings, including HC bylaws, which means the powers or the bylaws are in force immediately before the repeal. And also we've added the specified regulations, which means the road tunnels government regulations cap 368A. And other savings are, as you can see on page 005, section 18E of the Magistrates' Ordinance. Because according to Hong Kong law cap 1, many of the powers, that is, when bylaws are appealed, some powers, could be kept, while some others cannot be kept. But for the Magistrates' Ordinance, there is a requirement for admission of an offence, a written admission, and that cannot be kept under Hong Kong law chapter 1. And therefore, we have to made this saving here. And the other one is the road traffic driving offence points ordinance, which would also be saved. If anyone that is under the HC bylaws commits no offence and needs to have their points demerited, then we need to retain these powers under cap 1, because otherwise under cap 1 these powers would be lost. Fourthly, the transitional arrangements for certain traffic signs. All these actually 4 items under it refer to the traffic signs under the EHC bylaws. Whether in 374A, under those laws, these signs actually look a bit different from the rest. So I don't see any need. We don't see any need of replacing these signs just because they look a bit different. Therefore, we've proposed this transitional arrangements that as long as the traffic signs are in good condition, they will not be replaced. They will be changed, in accordance with 368A when they are in bad condition later on. So this is a transitional arrangement, just put in for the sake of, making unnecessary waste. And it's not feasible to demolish the signs and erect new ones in their place anyway. They could be changed later on when needed. So the 4 sub-items under this, actually are technical arrangements. And then Section 5, that is the provisions not to derogate from Section 23 of Interpretation and General Clauses Ordinance. So we stress here that most of the powers under 2 and 5 can be kept. And now we're talking about road tunnel government regulations, and the amendments to be made under that. And interpretation, on the next page, the interpretation, we've made some amendments. That is under Chapter 374, Subsidiary Legislation A. We actually added the for consistency's sake, in order to actually make the writings clearer, we actually have made this consequential amendments to put in Section 2 of the Road Traffic Ordinance and Regulation 2 of the Road Traffic Regulations. Next, you can see the arrows, the arrow there on the next page, which actually involves the adding of the words "the tunnel area of." This is we added this words "the tunnel area of" just to make things clearer to readers. For the triangle sign, the triangular sign, the additional sections to be added in this part actually refers to the traffic displays at the tunnel area of the Eastern Harbour crossing. And for subsection 4, we've added this a row marking the type shown in 24, prescribed in Schedule 1. And also for the square-shaped sign, the provision next to it is a reference. And then you can see below them, because for number 24 is a traffic signs and a road signs, and here, besides traffic, we actually make a distinction between traffic signs and road markings. The triangular signs and the come after it, they all are consequential amendments. For subsidiary legislation A, the arrow for one capital letter A in Chinese is 海底隧道. That is the Cross Harbour Tunnel in English. But it refers to, Hong Sui, the other tunnel, Cross Harbour Tunnel. But in your interpretation, in your main legislation, you only use the words tunnel and tunnel area. So how does it relate to your use of the term Cross Harbour Tunnel? Because in interpretation, there is no such distinction. Cross Harbour Tunnel refers to the one in Hong Kong, the tunnel in Hong Kong area. Yeah, you talk about the arrow pointing to 1A. In order to avoid misunderstanding, we actually make a distinction between tunnel and tunnel area. Whenever we see the word or a name with the capital letter T, in order to make the distinction between the capital letter T and tunnel area, I don't know whether you get it or not, Chairman. My question was, this main legislation and subsidiary legislation A, capital C, capital H, capital letter T, Cross Harbour Tunnel, refers, which tunnel is it referring to? It used to refer to Hong Sui, the one in Hong Kong, the tunnel in Hong Kong. You've not touched it now at all. Now you've added tunnel area, tunnel and tunnel area. So that refers to tunnels in Schedule 1. But what about your use of the term Cross Harbour Tunnel? Is there anything missing here? I don't quite follow that. Ms. Lam? Cross Harbour Tunnel, there's no particular definition in the main, legislation 368. You only see the word CHT in capital letters. You've crossed them out, right? Sorry, I can't follow. I just want to point out that the Cross Harbour Tunnel lacks an interpretation. The terms cross-harbor tunnel in the bill lacks an interpretation. Is there any interpretation for that? Thank you, Mr. Liang. I think the entire 368 in our government tunnel regulations, all these provisions are only applicable to tunnels mentioned in Schedule 1 of this bill, and cross-harbor tunnel is included in Schedule 1. So there are no other interpretations for, the other tunnels on the schedule. It's just that, the way the mechanism works is that the Chapter 368 regulates the runnings or the operations of the tunnels on Schedule 1. We have crossed out the schedule on next to it because we have rearranged the order of the tunnel. Okay, Chairman, let's not waste any more time. I think maybe I didn't ask it in the right way. I think maybe you didn't get my question. Let me ask it again. Now, in the original Schedule 1 that you have cancelled, having crossed out that schedule, there's no such thing as cross-harbor tunnel. In your bill, you only have tunnel area, these two terms, but there's no cross-harbor tunnel. And yet, Chairman, subsidiary legislation A, Section 31A, in English version, it uses cross-harbor tunnel in capital letters. I'm worried that the readers may not understand it, because there's no such thing as cross-harbor tunnel in capital letters in this bill. Because now in the interpretation in Schedule 1, there's no reference to cross-harbor tunnel capital letters. This is not something generic. It's not a generic term as it appears under Section 3, bracket 1, capital A. Ms. Wong, can you explain? In the drafting process, have there been any omissions or what? Thank you. I understand Mr. Liang's question. As I said, in the markup copy, page 003, we have a new Schedule 1. Item 2 is the cross-harbor tunnel with capital letters, CHT. So this 3 letters, cross-harbor tunnel, we do not regard as, Mr. Liang said, a generic term, because this name is already listed in the schedule. So the entire 368, in Chapter 368, it refers to all the tunnels regulated by this bill. We don't see any room for confusion, that people may be lost as to what CHT refers to, because Schedule 1 already lists out the 7 tunnels which are governed by the road tunnel government regulations. But I just want to see, the cross-harbor tunnel in the Section 1A refers to the tunnel in Hong Ham, Hong Sui, right? Yes. It's nothing to do with EHC. Yes, we're adding 1B, which refers to the tunnel area of the EHC, the traffic signs and road markings there.
So 1B refers to EHC, whereas 1A refers to specific traffic signs in the CHT. But of course, in subsection 1, it refers to traffic signs in all 7 tunnels. 1 capital A refers to signs in CHT, 1B to EHC. All right, I got it, Chairman. Please continue then. I'll continue. On page 009, one minor amendment. We have deleted the word area because in the interpretation clause we have already make an amendment in relation to tunnel and tunnel area. So here we don't see the need to include the word area. Page 10, 11A of Cap 368 sublege A. This relates to vehicles conveying dangerous goods. Previously, it refers only to the CHT, but now, because EHC is incorporated, and therefore we have added the specified tunnels as the CHT as well as the EHC. As for the square sign, the amendment relates to either the CHT or the specified tunnels. So this page, by and large, relates to the amendment marked in with a triangle. Page 11. Page 11 relates to Schedule 2. Schedule 2, we're going to add parts 1, 2, and 3. Because for CHT and EHC, the tolls contain parts 1, 2, and 3, and that is why we have specified parts 1, 2, and 3 of Schedule 2 in Section 12. As for the next one, 12A in the Chinese text, just a drafting amendment. We have changed it to the part on the traffic line. And then the next part, fee for removal of vehicles. Because in Schedule 2 we have added parts 1, 2, and 3, and then we moved the original parts to parts 4 and 5, etc. We have amended here the table in Section 2 of Part 4 of Schedule 2. Just a consequential amendment. And then page 13, similar amendments. For the arrow there, for the tunnel area of CHT, we've added the words or EHC, so that the same amendment applies in relation to the tunnel area. And the permit at the bottom, Part 5 of Schedule 2. Page 14. Because figure number 24 is now a traffic sign. We have a road marking we've added here with an arrow road marking, and then offenses and penalties. For the arrow added here, this is to have a better clarity of the provision in relation to different provisions in the traffic regulation. For 2 capital A, or rather subsection 2, sections 15, 16, or figures 15, 16, and 22 originally relates only to the CHT, and that is why we have deleted 15, 16, and 22 in subsection 2 and added the triangle part in 2 capital A, which relates specifically to the traffic signs appearing in the areas of the Cross Harbour Tunnel. For the arrow is 14 capital A. At present, 21 is not necessary because 21 relates to the Cross Harbour Tunnel, so this will be deleted. Subsection 4. The reference originally is 3.1a instead of 3.1. So we need to make it clear that we're talking about figure number 21, the traffic sign in the Cross Harbour Tunnel. So we have made it clear that we're referring to 3.1 capital A. And then the next section, again, a consequential amendment referring to Cross Harbour Tunnel. Page 15, schedule. Now we've changed the word sign to traffic signs and road markings, because the auto toll system and the offences and penalties relate to this signal as well, and we have made the consequential arrangement. Next page, figure number 23. Following that, we have added figure number 24, which is specific to the EHC, and we have therefore added figure number 24 to the subsidiary legislation. Page 17, Schedule 2. We have made some amendments for better clarity, for it to be more accessible to the public. That is, for tolls for tunnels other than the CHT, the tolls remain the same in this list. We've just made some minor amendments. Part 2 relates for Cross Harbour Tunnel. For vehicles with more than 2 axles, each additional axle in excess of 2. Now, having sought legal advice, we have revised the wording from each additional axle in excess of 2 to 4 vehicles with more than 2 axles, each additional axle in excess of 2. Part 3, tolls for Eastern Harbour Crossing, will now be incorporated in the sublege 368A. The tolls remain the same, as I explained just now. Removal fees, permit fees, they remain the same, but they've now been moved to Part 4 for greater clarity, and Part 5. Some consequential amendments following that, because the EHC ordinance will be repealed, the relevant references will be repealed as well, such as specification of public officers' notice. That is to delete all the references relating to CAP 215, prevention of bribery ordinance. The name of the franchisee will be deleted. The magistrate's ordinance on page 24, similar deletion. Page 25, Schedule 11, because the EHC ordinance will be repealed, all the relating bylaws will be deleted. Page 26, Road Traffic Driving Offence Points Ordinance, the same applies. Page 29, this is another consequential amendment. There were resolutions made in the Ledge Code to preserve certain powers. So in this amendment exercise, we have aligned the provisions for better consistency, and also some subsequent consequential amendments in the following pages. Any questions from members? Mr. Wong Yok Man. Well, I wasn't here for the earlier part of the meeting. I'm looking at the government's response, and I have a number of questions relating to the policy. Now, the government is resorting to scaremongering. If the bill isn't passed within this legislative term, and the last council meeting should be in mid-July, and if this bill cannot be passed in time, then all the disastrous consequences mentioned in your paper will realize. So my question is this. Looking at the council, how council business is handled at the moment, it is expected that the budget debate will not be completed before mid-May, and we also have a dozen or two bills to be passed in the council. If you don't jump the queue, if you don't implement other measures, why would you have the confidence that this bill will be passed in time? It's useless to resort to scaremongering tactics, because in your paper Well, you talk about what the bill seeks to do, and then here members are urged to finish examining the bill in a timely manner for the benefit of the public and the economy of Hong Kong. That means members are warned not to filibuster. Don't drag on our feet. But it's pointless. We're not dragging our feet. You have bills lining up. Even if the whole amendment bill, is walked through in this meeting and also you remind members not to move any amendment on tolls. Well, we are very clear about it. There is no way we can get in your way. The franchise will expire, and we're not dwelling on the point of BOT because it's a policy matter. Still, why are you confident that this bill will be passed within this term? What good ideas do you have? Well, let's take it that I believe everything you say. I save the argument. Well, because if you ask me, frankly, it would be in the interest of the public not to charge tolls for several months. Well, let's say I believe in the dire consequences stated in your paper. How can you make sure that the bill can be passed within this term? But frankly, I should put this question to Professor Anthony Cheung instead. We've completed the clause-by-clause scrutiny. We've completed examination of the bill. And Mr. Wong Yuk Man is asking on what basis you believe that the bill can be passed. And if the bill cannot be passed within this term, the catastrophic consequences you mentioned will happen. But I think the government definitely will have some ways to do it, either by jumping the queue or whatever, for the bill to be tabled in a council for resumption of second reading. So my question is, what is your plan in terms of the legislative arrangement, resumption of second reading? When will that happen? Yes, Mr. Wong? About this government response tabled, I just quoted from the conclusion. I just want to say that you should not exert pressure on us. We are being very cooperative already. Apart from Mr. Alan Leung asking about the term relating to Cross Harbour Tunnel, other members have not raised any questions. I myself didn't ask any question. We understand the urgency of the matter, but I have a question. Why isn't the bill tabled earlier? Now, about the consequences if the bill isn't passed, basically it's because of the two issues raised by members in the previous meeting, whether toll adjustments can be made, and also because of the tight timeline. If the bill isn't passed on the 7th of August, what should happen? These were the issues raised by members at the last meeting. Hence the government's response this time. But it's really alarming as I read the government's response. So what will happen now? What are you going to do about it? We have 20 bills lining up in the council within this term. So I asked the question just now, when is the government prepared to resume a second reading? Of course, the government will need to give us a timetable. We need to make the necessary arrangements, and the legal advisor has also read through the whole bill. And let's see if there are any drafting issues. I will invite the legal advisor to speak first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the Chairman for giving me this time. Members, you can notice that the administration has given us two replies. One is paper in which the government explains whether the tolls could be altered. So I hope to say to members, I think members understand as well, actually the chairman needs to consider the long title, the abstract, and also all the information note, government policy, and before he can decide whether whether any amendments could be made. And the chairman made some adjudications earlier on other cases. So members, if you want to get further information, I can provide you with supplementary information for your reference. The second paper from the administration spells out the scenarios when the bill could not be passed by August. How can the EHC continue to be operated and how tolls could be charged? And the paper also covers some legislative or legal stances. And last night, we only received the paper last night at about 6 p.m. So Legal Service Division needs time to go through the response, properly. So I urge that members give me the time to go through the administration's responses carefully. And if I find any legal concerns, please give me a time to either in writing or come back here again next time to deliver my views and also try to get clarifications from the administration. And thirdly, just the chairman has already said that because the Chinese version, the clause-by-clause scrutiny of the Chinese version of the bill has been done, and the chairman has asked me to make sure that the English version actually ties in with the Chinese version. I will try my best to actually go through the English version. And if members want to have any discussions with me on any of the issues in the text, you're welcome to contact me. Okay. As the chairman said, the government actually submitted these papers to you in response to members' questions. It's not that we want to actually make you feel unpleasant. We stated in our paper what could happen if the bill could not be passed, and our response actually has nothing to do with the bill put before you now. As the member said, our bill now is intended to actually incorporate HC into the the road tunnel government ordinance. So, therefore, any of the legal advisors' opinions, on our papers should have nothing to do with the bill. But anyway, I'd like to make this opportunity to, use this opportunity to thank members and chairman for scrutinizing the bill. I hope that the bill could be actually voted on in the main legislative meeting soon. And we can resume second reading after you've made a report to the House Committee. Yeah, as for the schedule, I will try to discuss with the Secretariat first, and our legal advisor would vet the English version she'll check it against the Chinese version. If there are no problems that she has found, then we will submit a report to the House Committee. I can't say when we would actually work on the report for the House Committee, but I'll wait till the administration and the Secretariat have the discussion first. Raymond Wong, I think it's very clear that we're waiting now for the legal advisor's opinions on the bill, Chinese and English version, and also on the administration's response, and see if there are any legal concerns. But the administration has said that, whatever is in the paper have nothing to do with the bill itself. But still, if the bill could not be passed, then that would have all sorts of implications in relation to policy, because we are talking about scenarios that could happen when there is an absence of legal basis. Please, I'd like to put this on record. I'd just like to argue about the rules of procedures. You are concerned that the government take over the management can the tunnel fees, is there room for tunnel fees to be reduced? If tunnel fees go down, maybe the tunnel traffic will be smoother, across Hong Kong. And you said that if you said that we can't make any amendments concerning tunnel fees, well, but Rule 57 of the Rules of Procedure, if the members and electrical chairman thinks that any amendment could actually have implications for government income, then that is, if we amend the tunnel fee, that actually constitute an arrangement that has implication on public money. So if that's the case, we actually should be entitled to move an amendment. In 2008, Regina Ip raised this idea of actually a tax for domestic helpers, and the chairman made a ruling in the end and approved the relevant amendment moved. So I don't see at this stage, well, maybe no one would move any amendment at this stage, but I would think about that, whether I should move one myself. But before we see any drafting for an amendment, we can't rule whether it violates 57, Rule 57 of our Rules of Procedures. But now you're saying that, there's no point for me to move an amendment because it'll be a violation of 57. But maybe I can try and let the chairman rule on it. I just want to clarify the matter. I'm not saying that I would move the amendment, but I'm just trying to discuss with you, that what could happen. I just also want to put this on record as well. You don't need to answer me because ultimately it's the overall chairman, the big chairman, to make a ruling. So those who are watching TV, whatever, or who are following what's happening, the whole thing is not controversial. But the only thing is, as a representative of the public, we can suggest make amendments on reducing tunnel tolls, because we could achieve a win-win situation, when toll comes down and overall tunnel traffic improves across Hong Kong. So just the legal advisor has said very clearly what she's going to do is follow up, in response to the government papers. But as for whether I will move an amendment on the tunnel toll, I will consider it and discuss with my personal assistants first. Okay, Ms. Long. Thank you, Mr. Wong. I just want to make it clear that if the EHC bill could not be passed, it's not just about that your tunnel fee could drop. There actually will be disastrous consequences on traffic in Kwun Tong, Tseung Kwan O, and so forth, and Hong Kong Island. You know that if one of the three tunnel is free, then naturally the people using the crossover tunnel normally would go to EHC, and then other people using another tunnel might move to the Hong Kong tunnel. So actually it could be an all-lose situation. And also for the frontline staff of EHC, if the bill could not be passed, then about 100 staff of the tunnel could lose their jobs. So I hope that members will seriously consider the scenario. People don't cross the tunnel just because it's free. They cross the tunnel because they have to. Well, I think issues are very clear to us. Let me remind you, we don't have a timetable now yet. So if you have any amendments, I would let you know the time limit for that. Legal advisor? Thank you, Chairman. I understand that all along the administration has said that the bill could not be passed. But that's nothing to do with the scrutiny of the bill. But in the blue bill, there is a commencement day, a clause on commencement day, which is on August 7, 2016. So members, you might want to consider that is the commencement day, August 7, cannot be reached. Then what consequences will there be? The administration has try to, of course, prepare the paper in response to the concern. And we, actually, legal division, will very carefully look at the government's response and let you know if we have any concerns. Okay, thank you. So I think it's now time's up for our meeting. I will set a time. That is March 1st. 10:45 in the morning for our next meeting. If our legal advisor, I hope that, hopefully the legal advisor can tell us what she thinks in writing. Her concerns, her response in writing. And the Secretariat and the administration can discuss the time. We tentatively will have a meeting on March 1st in the morning. If members have no views on the papers submitted, then there may not be a need for the meeting on March 1st. But I will let you know of that in advance. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.